What are the consequences of the tariff turmoil that President Trump has unleashed on the world? Join Richard Ebeling and me in this week's Libertarian Angle as we examine that question. Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and welcome to this week's Libertarian Angle, the show that brings you all the principled case for the libertarian philosophy. I'm joined by my co-host, Richard Ebeling, professor of economics at the Citadel. Richard, good to see you again.
It's good to be with you and our listeners and viewers.
Yeah, welcome back. And so, Richard, we've got the big tariff war, Donald Trump's big tariff war going on now. He seems to have done something that some people didn't expect. Just a whole boatload of tariffs against practically everybody, from what I can see. I'm not really sure who's on the list, but he's thrown the whole world into turmoil. Stock markets plummeting here, stock markets plummeting in Europe, Asia. People are losing a lot of money over this economic chaos. And it just, Richard, it just boggles my mind that we've still got to debate and discuss free trade and tariffs and trade wars. It just absolutely amazing to me that a president of the United States has put this country on this road. And I know we've talked about this before. I mean, we've talked about it for 35 years. One of our first books here at FFF was a book that you and I co-edited, The Case for Free Trade and Open Immigration. And because we've always argued that the trade issues are essentially the same as the immigration issues. Open borders for the free movements of goods, services, and people. And this president wants to wall off America from the rest of the world, both on trade and on immigration. I mean, you talk about isolationism. I mean, to me, this is a classic case of isolationism where you're building essentially a wall all around the United States to protect Americans from, overseas competition, and at the same time protect us from all the invaders who are coming to get, a better life or improve their well-being or even to survive. This is not exactly the type of America that our nation was founded on. It's very, very bizarre. And you see a lot of strange arguments that are being made. I mean, at least the mainstream press is acknowledging that a tariff is a sales tax, and they're referring to it as taxation. That to me is very encouraging. That's a sign that we have made progress over the many decades that we've been making this case, or at least a few decades, because the conception among people in the Trump administration seems to be that, like China is paying these tariffs, that I think Trump said something about we're really getting rich with the money that's coming in with the tariffs. Well, I doubt that's the case, but what he's referring to with we or the nation, he's referring to the government. This is a sales tax, and the money is coming from the American people. Now, I don't know if they've already started collecting the tax, but nonetheless, if and when they do, this is the American people who are paying this tax. So you have Republicans saying taxes are good, higher taxes are good. This is a benefit to the society. It's going to bring in a golden era of prosperity. The more tax revenue into the government, the better off we are. This is really bizarre thinking, Richard. I feel like sometimes I'm in Bizarro land, where Superman had that counterpart called Bizarro, where everything in Bizarro land was upside down and weird. There's also this notion that if another country is taxing its citizens through tariffs, because tariffs is a tax, that we need to retaliate against them by imposing or raising taxes on Americans. That's just nuts. It's like saying, okay, we're gonna teach you a lesson for taxing your citizens. And how are we going to teach you that lesson? By taxing Americans. And that's just really weird. And then finally, Richard, and I'll throw the baton over to you, is this trade deficit notion, which is also really, really interesting because you've got nations that are really going to be devastated. Like I read an article in the New York Times about a nation in Africa called Lesotho. Now, I had never heard of Lesotho, but Lesotho, the people in Lesotho, apparently it's a very small African country, have a per capita income of $1,000 per year. That's how much each person makes in this country, or every working person, adult. $1,000 a year. And the way they make their money is they make denim for blue jeans here in the United States. That's like, I don't know, 60, 70% of the nation's revenues. They're all sitting there and they've got pictures of them, making the denim that then is shipped to Levi or some other blue jean maker. And that's how they get their $1,000 a year. And so Trump has put this enormous uh, tariff on them. I forget what it is, but I think it's the neighborhood of like 50%, 40%, something like that, which will be devastating. But you see, they ship out, I think if I recall correctly, $270 million a year to the United States. They only buy $3 million from the United States, which is not surprising. They're only making $1,000 each. But you see, it seems to me that in the minds of people in the Trump administration, that you have to put a tariff on there, even if they might not have any tariffs on US goods coming in, because of the trade deficit, because Lesotho is selling more than what they're buying from the United States. So even if they go to Trump and say, we want to negotiate a deal and say no tariffs on American goods, it seems to me that Trump's reasoning might very well be, well, no, we got to keep that big tariff on you because there's a trade deficit until you start buying $270 million from us. Richard, this is economic inanity. And in fact, I'll wrap up this beginning segment by taking us back to the Articles of Confederation. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but my recollection of the Articles of Confederation was that one of the big problems they were having, which is why they met in Philadelphia for the Constitutional Convention, it was to modify the Articles of Confederation, not to come up with a constitution. But one of the big problems they were having was tariffs that were being put between the states. And they opposed this. They wanted free trade between the states. But it seems to me that if tariffs are really good in and of themselves, that if they really do lead to prosperity, in other words, more sales taxes on buying things from other states or from other nations, which is what Trump says, the same principle should apply to the states. That this is a way for each state to get wealthy by being able to put this sales tax on goods from other states, a tariff. Uh, Richard, this is just total economic inanity. What do you think?
Well, one of the most peculiar and almost amusing examples is that there seem to be a couple of islands um, near Antarctica, and it seems that a tariff has been placed on them as well. They're uninhabited. They just have penguins. So the penguins have a tariff imposed on whatever it is they would be selling to the United States. I don't know. But I guess it takes a bird brain president to be concerned with what brains may be not buying from America. But oh, did I say that? How cruel of me! How cruel of me! But the absurdity of it all is that Trump is obsessed with this idea, as you were saying, a balance of trade deficit. It is the crudest and most narrow conception of doing business. If I buy things, it costs me. If I sell things, I earn. Therefore, anything that I purchase is an undesirable cost. Everything that I sell is a beneficial gain. And therefore, the purpose is to minimize your expenses for what you buy, and you maximize your revenues from what you sell, so that you have a profit margin, a balance of trade surplus, with each and every person with whom you do business. And this is his conception. Well, if we're buying more from the European Union than we sell, if we're buying more from China than we sell, if we buy more from Japan than we sell, and so on and so forth, that somehow this is a demonstration of somehow of the other partner cheating us, taking advantage of us, stealing our jobs, taking our wealth away. Uh, and so the consequence is that, well, what do you want at a minimum? Well, at a minimum, you want every country to just buy the same amount from us that we buy from them. That is a balance of trade with each and every country in the world. And of course, the best of all worlds would be if the entire world bought more from us than we bought from them. Now, of course, a whole series of things are raising this. Now, of course, this very conception is like 400 years old. It's the mercantilist thinking before Adam Smith. The idea that a country, that trade is a zero-sum game. If I win, the other partner must lose. If he wins, I must be losing from the trade. So it's the idea that an exchange, a transaction, a trading association could be mutually beneficial is like somehow beyond the pale for Trump to really understand. But it goes worse than that. He not only is a mercantilist, he's a primitive mercantilist. You see, mercantilism began with this idea that if the nation imported more than it took in, it had a balance of trade deficit. Money would flow out, and therefore you're losing. And the idea was that then, therefore, you should have a balance of trade, balance, evenness with every country. Then the more, quote, sophisticated mercantilists said, but wait a second. It's okay to have a balance of trade deficit with country A if you're bringing in raw materials from country A and you're paying for them, but you then work up those materials into manufactured goods and then you sell it to somebody else and you make more from the second sale than you've incurred from the first purchase, and therefore you're a net gainer. So the idea that you have to have a balance of trade with every country is the crudest and most primitive of mercantilist notions. It's not even a sophisticated mercantilist idea. But of course, what Adam Smith and the classical economists and then the modern economists, including obviously free markets economists like Ludwig von Mises and others pointed out, was that all of this is absurd. The point is that people enter into trade only when they believe that they respectively are going to gain more than they're giving up. If I have hats and you have shoes, and if I value one of your pairs of shoes more than the hat I would have to give up for it, I gain from the trade. But then why would you give up a pair of your shoes to get one of my hats? Unless you believe that the hat that you could get from me was of greater value to you than the shoe you'd have to give me to get it. In other words, trade only occurs when each values more highly what the other has than what they have to give to get it. And therefore, the trade is always mutually beneficial. The other absurdity in this is that at the end of the day, everybody's trade has to balance with themselves. In other words, you can't spend more than you've earned. That which I've earned sets the financial limit or constraint on how much I can buy. But merely because that is the case, it doesn't mean that you have to have some balance with everyone. The example that I use often in class to explain this is that I teach economics as my source of income. I export my teaching services to my students. They're the purchaser, or their parents with the tuition they pay to the place where I teach that then pays me. But I have a balance of trade surplus with them. Why do I have a balance of trade surplus with them? Because they pay me my salary. But I don't turn around and spend my salary particularly on the goods that the parents of these students sell on the marketplace. It may be that all of their parents are specializing in some variety of goods that I have no interest in. So I have a balance of trade surplus with the parents who are paying the tuition of the students who are sitting in my classroom. They pay me, but I don't necessarily buy what they have to sell. Well, I go to my local supermarket and I want the food that they have to sell. But on the other hand, while they sell me the food, they don't necessarily want the economics lectures or articles or books that they could buy from me. So I have a balance of trade deficit with the supermarket, and I have a balance of trade surplus with the students who are paying the tuition for the lectures that I give in the classroom. But the point is, they have to balance in this way. Now, but balancing involves a whole series of things. So I want to, since this is being hammered away by Trump, I want to sort of explain in a little slightly different way why this is erroneous, that there really is no balance of trade problem, even country by country. Why? Well, let us suppose that we buy $1,000 worth of goods from Japan, and they have sold us goods, and they now have $1,000. Now, why would the Japanese have sold us goods? Because they want to earn income the same way you and I do. So we have the monetary wherewithal to buy the things we want as consumers. So let's suppose that out of the $1,000 that these Japanese sellers have earned by selling us their goods, they buy $800 of our finished goods and services. So we've paid them $1,000 for what they sell, and they've bought $800 from us for what we sell. Now, for Donald Trump, this is the problem. They've cheated us. They've taken advantage of us. We bought 1,000 of theirs. They only bought the 800 of ours. Obviously, we've gotten the short end of the stick. What else could those Japanese do with the remaining $200? Well, they could use it as wallpaper. They could put them on the coffee table as a conversation piece. Oh, look how cute American money looks. But no. What they will ask themselves is that what else could I use this money for? Well, one is what is called direct investment. They can take, let's say, $100 of the dollars that they've earned and invest it in the United States, either starting a business or partnering into an existing business. Are there not Honda plants in the United States, Volvo plants in the United States, Toyota plants in the United States, a whole variety of other businesses that foreign earners of dollars reinvest their dollars in to try to manufacture goods in the United States to sell not only to American consumers, but to then export out to the rest of the world. But what else could they do? Because 800 plus 100 is still only $900. Well, they could take $75 that they've earned and indirectly invest it in the United States. And what does that mean? Well, they could put it in a financial institution, a bank, just like you and I may save a part of our income and put it aside for future purchases and hope to gain earnest income so it grows in the future. Now, why would a Japanese who's earned dollars put it in an American financial institution? Maybe the banks just seem safer than in their own country or some other place to put it. Maybe they think that the rate of interest is a better return in the United States than putting it into a Japanese bank. But for whatever reason, let's suppose that they've decided to put $75 into an American financial institution. Well, that institution then funnels that money and all of its other depositors' money out of willing and one presumes credit-worthy borrowers, mostly Americans. That's adding to the savings pool upon which American businessmen can draw for investment and capital formation to enhance future productivity in the United States. Now, of course, the person who's been paying attention would say, okay, $800 of our goods, $100 of a direct investment, $75 of an indirect investment, money left in a bank to earn interest income, but that still leaves $25. Well, let's suppose that some of those Japanese earners of those dollars decide they don't want to buy American goods, but they find some European Union goods more attractive. Well, in the European Union, in most of the countries, they use euros, not dollars. So, and you can't spend dollars in these countries. So what will the holders of this $25 in Japan do? They'll go to the foreign exchange market and they'll offer to trade those dollars for euros at whatever the exchange rate is for that day. How many dollars for a certain number of euros? But why would anyone have sold them euros in exchange for dollars? Because they wanted to use dollars for something. And what would they want to use dollars for? They either want to buy our goods or directly invest in the American economy or indirectly invest by putting it in an American bank to earn interest. And then guess what? 800 plus 100 plus 75 plus 25 equals what? $1,000. At the end of the day, the balance of payments, including all of these categories balances, It's basically simple accounting. Debits equal credits, expenditures equal receipts. And if you've included everything in the little rows and columns that you're supposed to, and you've done your arithmetic correctly, they have to balance. So all I can suggest is that when Trump was going to an institution of higher learning and was earning his own degree, he clearly missed and goofed off not going to the econ classes on the fundamentals of trade and international exchange.
Well, you make a lot of good points, and as you were talking, I was thinking about the trade deficit between Virginia and Florida. I mean, that's a real serious thing, Richard. I mean, what's going to happen if we continue to let this trade deficit go on? Now, you might ask me, how much is the trade deficit? And I'm going to say, well, I don't know.
Right.
Nobody knows.
Correct.
Nobody cares. I mean, my hunch is that it's probably Virginia's spending more in Florida than vice versa. But who knows? But let's assume it is. Who cares? Nobody's pacing the floors. Nobody's losing sleep at night. I mean, the best thing that could ever happen is the government stop publishing statistics of who's buying from whom because of this inane trade deficit thing. But here's another thing I was thinking. Maybe you can explain it to me. Or, well, for one thing, let me just say, from the positive standpoint, it seems to me that the economists and the smart people are all coming out against this protectionism, which is fascinating to me. I mean, it's like Trump is holding lonely ground, except for his devoted Trumpsters, that they're going to support whatever he does, regardless of what he does and why he does it. They're like a cult. If President Trump's doing it, I'm going to support it. But I'm amazed at the number of op-eds in the mainstream press from liberals, progressives, and conservatives, and it's just fantastic in terms of showing why this is so devastating to people, including poor people. I mean, like I just mentioned, that country in Africa, these are poor people that you're just devastating with these things. But here in the United States, a sales tax is a regressive tax. It hurts the poor, the people that are barely making ends meet, that are already getting, shattered with inflation by the Federal Reserve, the debasement of their money. And now you've got Trump saying, well, the Fed should lower interest rates to get him out of this pickle that he got himself into, which is really saying that the Fed should debase the currency even more, that they should just keep inflate the money supply more. Well, that'd be the worst thing, Richard. Is that what we really need? A constantly debased currency? That's what we've had ever since the Federal Reserve was established. It's the worst thing in the world to try to deal with the horrors that have been caused by this debacle by inflating the money supply. But maybe you can explain this one to me. This is what the Trump followers say, which I find really fascinating. You've got all these professional economists now that never knew anything about economics, but they've had to quickly create arguments to support Trump. And they're saying that tariffs are a good thing, that they're going to lead us to the golden era, manufacturing plants spewing out smoke in the cities again, and so forth. Okay, so they're saying in and of themselves, this whole tariff thing is a great thing. Well, then they say, hey, look at all these countries that are surrendering. They're coming to Trump to strike a bargain. And I say, well, really, what's the bargain? They're going to lower their tariffs. We're going to force them to lower their tariffs. In other words, they're going to strike a deal, supposedly, where both sides lower their tariffs. But how is that good? If tariffs are good in and of themselves, why do you want to reduce them? Where is the argument there? It seems to me that's a contradiction. On the one hand, you're saying tariffs are good. On the other hand, you're saying, hey, Jacob, we might be able to lower our tariffs if the other countries surrender in the trade war. More inanity, Richard. One
Well, it's
more.
because there are two different goals, but that are inconsistent with each other, and both exist in Donald Trump's mind. On the one hand, he views himself as the deal maker. You can make you make You make an outrageous demand, and then the other side wants to do business with you, and they give in. And then, having made an outrageous demand, you then lower your own demand when they've surrendered to you. Well, that's the man of the art of the deal, because he's the big negotiator, right? The deal maker. But there's another side of Donald Trump that has been present for long before he went into politics. You can watch on YouTube interviews that he did 30 or 40 years ago, that is long before he thought of running for political office, in which he espoused the same idea that the world takes advantage of America because through international trade, we're losing our industrial base. Workers don't have those good manufacturing jobs. We're no longer number one in the world. But for America to be number one in the world in the way he's defining it, that is, we return industrialization, steel manufacturing, construction, smokestack industries back to the United States, requires him not to lower these tariffs. He has to create hothouse environments in which he artificially raises the cost of bringing in foreign goods of these types sufficiently that it becomes profitable to do them at home, that without the tariffs would not exist. Now, by doing this, he cannot then lower the tariffs. If he lowers the tariffs, he undermines his very goal of trying to recreate an America that he sees as his golden era and which we have to return to. So either has prohibitive tariffs to make it so costly to bring in foreign goods that unnaturally industries grow back in the United States, or you lower the tariffs to try to be able to sell more by a deal, but that means that you undermine your protective tariff purpose. So you're either a mercantilist, better homespun, better made at home, and you just sell if you can, but don't buy from others, or you view it as a deal. Well, if you lower your tariffs, will lower ours. And that is an inconsistency in his own mindset. But the point to realize is that to the extent that he dogmatically believes in that mercantilist attitude of better made at home than purchased from abroad, he inevitably will raise the cost of living for everybody in the United States. I often tell my students the following example. Suppose that a foreign manufacturer can make something for $5 that you used to buy from the American producer for 10. As a consumer, you're gaining. You now have for $5 what used to cost you 10. You have the good for $5, and you have $5 left over in your pocket to buy things that previously you couldn't afford to. Now, will the domestic producer who now faces this foreign $5 competitor from abroad lose business, market share? Might he maybe go out of business? Yes, he might. Does that mean that there are no alternative investment opportunities or employment opportunities? Of course, no. Because the fact that you bought it for 5 and now have an extra 5 to spend in other directions raises the demands for other things in America, other profit opportunities to shift industry, now that there's a more cost-efficient way to get what you want, and the jobs being made there, as well as the foreigner who sold it to you for $5. Why did he want the $5? He'll want to buy American goods, and that will increase the demand and the employments in the export industry. Now, if that's all true, that being able to buy things at a lower expense makes production not only more efficient, but raises the standard of living in the way I've just tried to very briefly explain, then then raising a tariff reverses this. Let's suppose that the foreigner was selling it for $5 and Trump imposes a tariff that results in it only being able to be imported into the United States for $10. And now the domestic manufacturer is saved from the foreign competition. Now we, the American consumers, now are going to have to pay $10 for what we used to pay 5. We're not going to be able to spend as much on other things because now it costs us $10 instead of 5. That's going to decrease the demand for other American goods that we can no longer afford if we're now paying $10 for the domestic version. That's going to diminish employment opportunities. And since the foreign competitor is no longer able to sell his good in the US market, the export industries of America will see a decrease in their demand. He's no longer earning his $5. He doesn't have $5 to spend on American exports. So in other words, you diminish the opportunities and the qualities of life by narrowing the choices, reducing people's incomes to be able to buy all that they previously had been able to buy. And at the same time, you undermine export industries because the less you import, the less you export. So if you want to raise the standard cost of living, if you want to reduce choices, and if you want to make earning a living more costly and difficult, then have these tariffs. Yes, we can have our hothouse smokestack industries, but it will be at the cost of a waste of resources, using more resources than are necessary to get what you want, and delay or reverse the standard of living that we have in the United States. That's the golden age that he wants to create, a backward standard of living and more of a costly hill to climb to get your standard of living to go up in the future.
All right, one more economic point I'd like you to address, and that is this notion that American businessmen are shipping jobs abroad. If you take like this country I'd mentioned in Africa, Lesotho, where they're making denim for blue jeans. Um, I would assume Levi's found that it's very efficient to be hiring these people in Lesotho to make this denim or put the denim together rather than here in the United States. And let's just assume hypothetically that they laid off workers here because they could hire these people in Africa for, 10% of what they were paying American workers here. Why is that not a good thing, Richard?
It is a good thing because now Americans are able to buy denim clothes for less than if they were made at home. And it's just an example of the instance I gave. The Americans now have more money in their pocket. It creates alternative job opportunities for things that were previously not in demand, but which Americans can now afford because they're buying this foreign lower cost product instead. And to the extent that whether it's the people in Lesotho or others, there will be export demands for American goods. It is not harmful. It all goes back to Frederick Bastier's idea of what is seen and what is not seen. What is seen is, oh, the foreign competitor can sell something for less, and the immediate American rival may lose market share, to reduce profits, work is let off. But what is not seen is the things that I was trying to elaborate. The fact that the American consumer has more money in his pocket. He can now buy things that previously he could not afford that will create alternative profit opportunities, better employment opportunities in terms of more goods offered and higher standards of living for everyone. And that, in fact, the additional thing is, since now the foreign rival is also at work facing the domestic competitor, it makes the domestic competitor have to work harder. It makes him have to compete. Oh, I not only face my domestic rivals, I now have foreign rivals. I have to stay on my toes. Can I make it better? Can I make it less expensive? Can I make it in a way that is a new and different version of the product that will make my product more attractive to my customers so I don't lose out either to my domestic rival or my foreign competitor. So to the extent that protectionism, mercantilist policies reduce global competition, you reduce the competitive drive to make products innovatively better, less expensive, and the new and the different.
Okay, well, I know we're about out of time, but let me just emphasize what I think, and I think you'd agree with me, is that the biggest argument in favor of free trade and against what Trump is doing is what he's doing is a destruction of our freedom. Thomas Jefferson pointed out in the Declaration of Independence that our rights pre-exist government. They're natural, they're God-given. They're not privileges of government. And one of those is liberty. And liberty means the right to do whatever you want with your own money. Buy and sell from whomever and to whomever you want anywhere in the world. That's part of being a free person, or traveling to Cuba and spending money there, notwithstanding the fact you've got this idiotic embargo there and all these sanctions against these other countries. They destroy our rights as human beings here in the United States. And it's important for people to recognize that they're supporting that. They're supporting the acceleration of the destruction of their own freedom.
Well,
Finally,
go ahead.
finally, let me just say that there's a lawsuit that's been filed, or some lawsuits that are questioning the constitutionality of what he's doing. And good for them. That here's a guy that's raising taxes on his own initiative. This is Congress's job to raise taxes, pass a law, president signs it into law. He's doing this by executive decree, by declaring a national emergency. Where's the emergency? It's ridiculous. And now there's people challenging the constitutionality of these tariffs. Unfortunately, it'll take probably 2 or 3 years to work its way through the courts. But it's good for them for challenging the constitutionality of what he's doing, because in my opinion, what he's doing is clearly unconstitutional.
Yeah, if some viewers and listeners say, "What do you mean Trump is reducing our freedom in America?" Well, only the other day, one of the reporters asked him, "But won't these high tariffs result in Americans having to pay more for automobiles?" Trump said, and this is close to a quote, "I don't care if they pay more for those foreign cars, because then they'll buy an American car." This is Donald Trump wanting to dictate what you pay and from whom you buy. In other words, it's Donald Trump as a central planner. He knows what industry should be in America. He knows what jobs should exist, what the pay should be, what the choices available to the American consumer should be. In other words, he is an advocate of the planned command economy, with him as the central planner, the economic dictator. And if that isn't a threat to each and every one of our liberty, then I don't know what is.
On that note, we'll wrap things up. Richard, as always, it's a real pleasure to talk to you. Thank you all for tuning in. Thanks for your great support of the Future of Freedom Foundation. And Richard, I look forward to talking to you next week.
Absolutely. Till next time.